CIA agent, John is watching a suspicious man from the roof of a building. Beside him stands senior CIA agent Ben, who has worked for the agency for many years and has long been friends with John. It turns out the two are tracking a Russian secret agent named Evgeny. Eventually, Ben realizes that the best thing to do is simply to approach and talk to the subject of their surveillance. When Evgeny sees the agents, he smiles broadly, says that he is currently on vacation, and advises his CIA colleague to relax. This does not convince Ben, who promises that he will keep a close eye on the Russian agent. A few days later, in the evening, Ben goes to a cafe with his wife Farah to celebrate another anniversary of their marriage. The couple has an adult son, Nick, who lives in another city. Farah also works at CIA headquarters where she handles classified data. The spouses sit on the outdoor terrace near the cafe, and soon Farah goes inside because she needs to use the restroom. At that very moment, a powerful explosion goes off. 6 months pass. Farah was killed in the terrible explosion at the cafe, while Ben survived and after a long period of treatment returned to work. The man is still grieving for his wife, constantly visits her grave at the cemetery, and is determined at all costs to find those responsible for her death. At a meeting with CIA leadership, Ben insists on continuing the investigation into the explosion, but his superiors intend to close the case, convinced that it was merely a household gas explosion. Furious, Ben storms out of the office where he encounters the CIA director, who offers his condolences but advises the widower to accept the loss and start a new life. The CIA leadership nevertheless closes the case of the cafe explosion, so Ben decides to conduct his own investigation. First, he goes to his hacker friend Desmond, who also works for the CIA. The two men repeatedly review the security footage of the cafe explosion and finally notice a suspicious man sitting at one of the tables. Ben immediately remembers that he has seen this mysterious stranger before, standing near Evgeny, which means that Russian intelligence services are most likely involved in his wife's death. Ben returns home, thinking about how he can now get close to Evgeny. Memories of his late wife once again wash over him. The agent recalls how Farah once gave him an unusual necklace and asked him never to take it off, promising that the jewelry would bring him good luck. The next day, Ben meets John at a cafe. They have been friends for many years. Ben shares his suspicions about the Russian intelligence services and asks John for help because he must reach Evgeny at all costs. John promises to support his friend, and the two agree to meet again later. Ben then meets Farah's best friend Hitchens and questions her about his late wife. Hitchens unexpectedly reveals that Farah had a secret bank account with a fairly large sum of money, after which she hands Ben the documents and passwords so that he can withdraw all the funds from the bank. A few days later, Ben finds out that Evgeny is at a casino. Ben goes there and immediately accuses the Russian agent of being responsible for the cafe explosion. Evgeny is enraged by such audacity and orders his men to teach the American a lesson. Ben fights back stubbornly and manages to hold his own for a while, but they eventually overwhelm him with their numbers. At the same time, Nick, Ben's son, is having lunch with his girlfriend. Suddenly, several CIA agents appear and say that Ben sent them and that Nick urgently needs to come with them for his own safety. Nick is surprised, since his father usually calls him personally, but sensing the urgency of the situation, he agrees to get into the agent's car. Meanwhile, Evgeny and his henchmen tie Ben up and take him to his secret hideout. Unexpectedly, Evgeny orders his men to release the captive and asks why he is accusing him of his wife's death. Ben pulls out a flash drive with the cafe explosion footage and points to a man in the video who works for Evgeny. The Russian agent replies that this man no longer works for them because he went after big money and became a mercenary. Suddenly, several armed men burst into the building and open fire. In the shootout that follows, several fighters on both sides are killed, and Ben manages to escape and contact John by phone. John soon arrives at the scene and picks Ben up in his car. Ben is surprised at how quickly his friend got to him, and John says that by pure coincidence he happened to be nearby. Ben also asks his friend to look after Nick, since his son also seems to be in danger. John replies that he has already taken care of that and has sent several agents to the boy. Soon John brings his friend to a small boat, promising that he will be completely safe there. At the same time, 3 CIA agents bring Nick into a building. The young man says that he wants to speak to his father, but the agents ignore him and roughly shove him inside. On the boat, John casually asks Ben whether Farah gave him anything before her death. Ben does not like what is happening and replies that this is his personal business. John then leads his friend into the hold, where Ben is astonished to see several armed men who look like experienced mercenaries. It turns out that these mercenaries work for John, and it was they who attacked Evgeny's hideout. The mercenaries tie Ben to a chair and begin torturing him with electric shocks, forcing him to confess what Farah gave him before her death. To speed up the interrogation, John leaves, planning to pick up and bring Nick here, who is being held captive by his men. Meanwhile, the mercenaries continue torturing Ben in order to break him. The mercenary leader, Karen, sneers maliciously and declares that it was he who organized the cafe explosion and killed Farah. Moreover, they were ordered to do so by some powerful people inside the CIA. Ben is in shock and cannot believe what he is hearing, but he does not have time to learn more because an unknown masked stranger suddenly bursts into the ship's hold. The stranger shoots several of the mercenaries and frees Ben. Under the mask turns out to be a mysterious woman named Christina, with whom Ben fights his way to the exit. Karen attacks Ben, but the agent manages to defeat the mercenary leader and push him into the sea. Ben and Christina get into a small boat and quickly sail away from the ship before more mercenaries arrive. Christina takes Ben to a secret hideout where she tells him that she was Farah's close friend and partner. The woman adds that the unusual necklace Farah gave her husband shortly before her death is actually a key to a hidden room where very important information is stored. It turns out that Farah and Christina obtained top-secret data about the CIA director's corruption schemes, which they intended to make public. However, their enemies learned about this and managed to kill Farah. Now they are desperate to get their hands on the incriminating evidence in order to destroy it. Reaching the secret room, Ben uses the necklace to open it. Inside, they find a laptop containing the secret information Christina was talking about. Ben cannot believe his eyes when he learns about the massive corruption schemes and bribes involving the CIA director. After learning the truth, Ben calls John and offers to exchange the laptop with the incriminating evidence for his son, threatening that if John refuses, he will leak all this secret information to the press. John agrees, and the two arrange to meet at an agreed-upon location. Ben fully understands that John will deceive and betray him again, so the agent asks Christina to help him. He also calls Desmond, gives him all the compromising material on the CIA director, and asks him to publish it in the press if anything happens to him. Almost reaching the meeting place, Ben drops Christina off, fully aware that an ambush awaits them ahead. Finally meeting John, Ben sees that he is accompanied by several armed mercenaries. John releases Nick, after which Ben tells his son to get into his car, while he himself hands over the laptop with the data to the traitor. At that moment, Christina begins shooting the mercenaries with a sniper rifle. Ben takes advantage of the enemy's confusion, grabs the laptop, jumps into his car, and floors the gas. John and the surviving Charon give chase. Ben forces the enemy's car to crash into an obstacle and flip over, killing Charon, but John manages to jump out of the vehicle and tries to escape. After making sure that Charon is dead, Ben catches up with John and challenges him to a one-on-one fight. The traitor accepts and boldly throws himself into the fight, but Ben manages to overpower him and knock him out. Ben waits for other CIA agents to arrive and orders them to take the traitor John into custody. Then Ben calls someone and asks for help in exposing the CIA director, as he himself still fears an attempt on his and his son's lives. A couple of days later, when the CIA director is meeting with high-ranking government officials, Evgeny suddenly bursts into the office to reveal the incriminating evidence against the CIA director and expose him in front of everyone present. The CIA director tries to opravdаться, but Interpol arrests him for numerous crimes and sends the man to prison. Finally, having completed his mission, Ben sadly remembers his wife, who at the cost of her life helped restore justice and put the corrupt official behind bars. This is where the film ends.